Jesus. Some say Adolf Hitler got his hands on it in World War II and hid it from the rest of the world. Now, some say the spear controls your destiny.
Relic believed to endow those who possess it with supernatural powers. Thousands have died for it. Now, Strange Universe brings you the elusive mystery of the legendary Spear of Destiny. It's a 20-inch long piece of iron, the influence of which is legendary. Calling it the Spear of Destiny or Holy Lance, antiquities dealer David Wilcoxon recounts the relic's history.
The centurion's name was Gaius Cassius Longinus, or so the story goes. He used it to pierce the side of Christ at the crucifixion to spare him the agony of having his legs broken and slowly dying.
The Holy Roman Empire adopted the spear as its own, inserted a nail said to come from the crucifixion into the blade, and used it to bless the coronation of Constantine and every emperor thereafter.
And they would draw hearts on paper, and they would pass the lance through the hearts, and they would hand them out as prescriptions and as things that would cure the worst of diseases, and many times it was said to have worked.
By 1914, the lance had ended up in the treasure room of the Habsburg Palace in Vienna. Producer Jonathan Devin discovered more interesting history while researching a film on the spear.
When Hitler was 16, he was living in Vienna. He saw the spear, and on beholding the spear, he went crazy. He started raving that the spear would be his. He somehow saw his place in world history in this moment. He was bodily carried out by guards from the museum.
As the story goes, is that he fantasized many, many times about possessing the Holy Lance, because the story has always been that whoever possessed it controlled the destiny of the world.
4 decades later, Hitler marched his troops into Austria, where they headed straight for the royal treasury and took a sword, a crown, and the Holy Lance.
He left with these 3 artifacts, leaving all the other great wealth of artifacts that were there, leaving them intact in the museum.
Some say back in Germany at Wolfsburg Castle, Hitler, with a spear in hand, would assemble his top SS officers in this secret chamber and perform black magic ceremonies.
He wanted to resurrect this Teutonic Knight clan, complete with swords and daggers and capes and all the regalia that went with it.
After the war, the mysterious spear was found in a salt cave and delivered to the Habsburg Museum. Or was it? David Wilcoxon isn't so sure.
I believe that Hitler commissioned a Japanese sword maker to take shavings from the original and to recast it.
Was the real lance hidden away along with millions of dollars worth of stolen artwork? An aging Nazi who would not identify himself phoned the antiquarian.
He claimed to be some high official in the Nazi party who was a courier for Hitler. He supposedly knew where all of these artifacts were hidden. And I think that after he dies, in his will, there would be a, if you will, a treasure map left where these things are.
Until then, the world will have to be content with the spear now on display. But does it still have magical powers when people meet up with it?
The power that it holds and the ability it has to transfigure human course of action is in our own minds and hearts.
Wilcoxon said Hitler was so paranoid about losing the spear and its power that he buried the sacred relic, and after that, the tide of war turned against him.
Fascinating. And beyond. Hello, I'm Emmett Miller.
And I'm Dana Adams. Welcome to Strange Universe.
It might have been the most fantastic top-secret weapon developed by history's most maniacal military leader. Some say it was actually the Führer's spaced-out strategy to rule the world and beyond.
Adolf Hitler was a tyrant who would stop at nothing to achieve world domination. This insane drive for power was also displayed in Hitler's thirst for technologically advanced war machines. Henry Stevens heads an organization called the German Research Project.
We're designing craft that today we would call flying saucers or UFOs. The craft are fast, they can be armed, and they can be armed with devices that will simply make your enemy's craft fall from the sky.
And Henry contends that there were many types of these craft, all built by Hitler's SS. For Henry, proof comes in the form of these blueprints.
This is a cutaway drawing of two Vril craft. This is the Vril engine. This has, for instance, it has living rooms and sleeping rooms and kitchens, and the whole thing rotated.
A craft similar to this was, according to Henry, seen by a German prisoner of war. The ship is described as between 75 to 100 yards in diameter. These details were given in a letter purportedly written by J. Edgar Hoover. But Henry's not the first person to make such wild suggestions. This veteran fighter pilot claims he was trailed by a German UFO.
You couldn't shoot them down. They couldn't, no matter what maneuver we went through, they stayed exactly in position.
Journalist Philip Klass frequently offers his skeptical opinion on German flying saucers.
They had developed flying wing type aircraft, somewhat like our current stealth bomber, the B-2. And from an angle, a flying wing can look sort of like a flying saucer.
Henry disagrees. He feels that the Germans were capable of creating flying saucers.
In my opinion, most of what we see is, and call UFOs throughout the world are man-made. Who is building them? Anybody could be building them. But there's no reason why a small German company couldn't be building these things.
In this documentary entitled UFOs, Secrets of the Third Reich, Andreas Epp claims to have seen a working prototype of his own design for a German saucer.
It had no wings, absolutely none. I took a photo and wound on the film, but it was already directly over me. Then I took a second photo, and I could see that it was a flying gyroscope, a flying saucer.
And Henry Stevens is convinced that the end of the war did not mean the end of this technology.
Well, yes, this technology certainly survived because the SS survived.
And according to Henry, when the SS fled to places like South America, they took their technology with them.
Because as soon as the war ended, the earliest UFO reports weren't in Roswell, they were in Patagonia in South America.
So while Henry has an earthly explanation for these craft, Philip Klass believes they simply do not exist.
We know exactly what the Germans had in the way of weapons, and we know they had no flying saucers.
But basically, with no physical proof and fewer eyewitnesses, the mystery of Hitler's saucers is certain to remain a mystery.
In the 1950s, the U.S. government contracted with a Canadian company to build a saucer-shaped craft called the VZ-9. This saucer project was considered a total failure. On tomorrow's cover story, a controversial priest, is he exorcising